So, yeah, just about their title. So when we talk about the talk want to do, right? Like we spoke with Anne, and she says, "Hey, Peter, I want you to talk about amazing, splendid, and wonderful features in MariaDB, right?" And I said, "Anna, do you know the cap theorem? In a database, it always can get only 2 out of 3, right? You recognize that well, and that's how we came up with this splendid, wonderful feature, and we had to draw that, the third one. So with this presentation, it's kind of builds on what the presentation I had done in the last year. And what I want to talk in this case is about things which I think are the most interesting since that time, and then also to kind of to go over maybe for new folks something that I spoke before, if you have the time for that. If not, then well, it doesn't matter. Kind of it's in the slides, and maybe you can use it for something. So let me first start with something which is a new feature, not a feature, but I think it's still worth talking about, right? I think if you look at the last year when I had a meeting, there was always kind of a question, well, what is going on with MariaDB, not the foundation, but the corporation, but well, you know, it's still entities that are kind of very relying on each other for success, and I think by now we know what this question was resolved, right? And with K1 acquiring MariaDB, and from what I hear from a bunch of folks, relationships getting better, and I'm very much hopeful that with that their MariaDB community and all of us will benefit. The next important thing is we are finally done with MariaDB 10, right? Because there was this joke for years, right? But the MySQL is always stuck in 5, right? And MariaDB is stuck at 10, right? And now we know, well, there was MySQL 8 and newer versions, right? And MariaDB is 11 and going. And finally, we have MariaDB 11 as an LTS, which is very meaningful, right? Because the customers I work about, right, they are typically rather conservative. So if they say, hey guys, here is this database, and it's only going to be supported for the new year, and then you'll have to do another major database upgrade. A lot of them, they don't quite like that, right? They still like to do the database upgrades kind of more, less regularly, right? And so their MariaDB 11.4, which is going to maintain until 2029. That is amazing thing, and I think that's going to get more folks moving to MariaDB 11. Then next, let's talk about the biggest topic, right? If you, unless you've been living under the rock, right, and probably even if you were, you heard about this LLMs, ChatGPT, right? All this kind of like AI are being all the rage recently. And if you look at their databases, like, well, your kind of normal relational database, what we need for that is their vector search functionality. Now, actually, on the last FOSDEM, I gave a talk about the vector search in different databases, right? And I think it was very interesting to look at that time what all the databases, like open source, commercial, that had some implementation of the vector search, more or less. They also have a number of dedicated vector-focused databases, but the MySQL and MariaDB were an exception. With MySQL, they have released their functionality not only kind of in a commercial enterprise version as you would expect, but for some reason choose to bolt it on and make it like a cloud only available as their only as a part of their cloud offering called the Heatwave. And it is very good to see what MariaDB took the step to implement the vector search functionality. I think that is probably their major announcement, and I think that is also their major opportunity, right, to get the hearts and minds of the new modern developers and also sort of like a future-proofing in the companies, because the management is always thinking, hey, you know what, we are going to be AI is going to be part of pretty much any application out there. So the no heat wave required, right? I think that is a great feature, right? And I think it's kind of very interesting, right? How even if you look at the MySQL community, right, there is this kind of a little bit like an Oracle bubble. Then there are some customers which are actually using HeatWave, right? But 99% in the MySQL space, we kind of don't care. Oh, it's a HeatWave, that's some entirely thing as well as it could be in Oracle. We do not care about that. Now the thing in this case, which I think is very cool about the MariaDB implementation, and you guys probably saw that, is it does pretty well in benchmarks, right? And we can see that not only some internal benchmarks done by MariaDB, but also benchmarks done by Mark Callaghan, right? And he's a very respected person in the ecosystem, and he's probably like one of the few people I would trust, even if you say, well, you know what, these benchmarks were sponsored by MariaDB Foundation, right? It doesn't mean, hey, you know what, Mark would ask, hey guys, what numbers do you want me to draw, right? I mean, he will do your work, share the numbers, maybe help you to fix if the benchmark does not right, but I find that is very credible. Now, all you guys know, I like to poke a bear, so when you get those results, I'll post it on LinkedIn and say, hey guys, the PostgreSQL people, what do you think about this? Like almost like the very first release of MariaDB vector search kind of is faster than PG vector. And there are a couple of things here interesting. Like, of course, to highlight, there are also, let's say, some other extensions kind of beyond PG vector, which are also saying, hey, PG vector is slow and this stuff is much better. There is also a bunch of things about how to benchmark Postgres, right? And look, I understand, like in every previous benchmark, you can point out, oh, only if you change this option, everything will be different. And that option probably would make like a 2% difference, right? Which is irrelevant, but then people are losing, right? Like they like to point out the things they would change everything. But I like this kind of last one interesting, right? Which is for me, it was always interesting to see that often this, arrogance by a lot of the very respectful members of the PostgreSQL community by saying, hey, I've never seen MariaDB outperform Postgres, right? I mean, that is, just like a bizarre statement, right? I think if, for me, that was...
We have public benchmarks, a lot of data that shows that Postgres is better in some cases, and much worse in others.
Oh yes, fine. So look, I totally understand, right? And I think everybody who understands in kind of engineering, well, it's all about choices, right? You typically have to choose. Hey, you choose one decision and another, and there are trade-offs. Also, anyway, I just wanted to highlight that's kind of an interesting take. You will see. Now, obviously, there are some benchmarks from other. With other technologies as well, right? Because PostgreSQL is not only one vector search database, and this look pretty impressive in my book. Honestly, I did not benchmark it myself. I'm also would say not sure to what extent the benchmark themselves are the most important thing, right, in this regard. Because when it comes to the applications, I would expect there would be some people saying, hey, we are building some application which is, absolutely ginormous. Think about like a Facebook scale, and then they would need something, say, hey, can I really have some sort of like a distributed system which can have that functionality, right? And then there are always going to be a lot of smaller systems, right? Hey, you know what? I want to add, I don't know, let's say semantic search to my WordPress installation. In this case, you just need a good enough performance, right? I mean, it's in this case. So what you actually need in this case, I think, is a usability, right? And for me, what is very interesting to see what is the next step, what MariaDB is going to see. Yes, it's implemented this kind of a raw database functionality. You can store vectors, you can find mirror stuff, and some other functions like PostgreSQL has that. But what can we do to enable the developers to build application faster and easy? Because that's what they want, right? And that is, I think, where the battle for developers' hearts will be. Now, if you look at the Postgres, right, for example, there's like a number of levels. Like you'll see, well, there is a PG vectorized extension, for example, which allows us saying, hey, you can now interface with the various, open source and proprietary LLMs very easy. Hey, you have a bunch of text and you want to generate embeddings of them in a database, boom, right? You can do that. There's also like a PostgreSQL ML, which kind of builds even more infrastructure on it, saying, hey guys, if you want to build a RAG, right, for example, augmented application generation, right, applications based on Postgres, we provide you some framework. And again, I am not saying all of that absolutely have to be in scope for MariaDB Foundation. I think the open source is wonderful because of the cooperation between the parties, right? And often it's saying, hey, you're just building the awesome component for other people to do, right? If you remember the story of MySQL, it was part of the LAMP stack. It wasn't trying to be the LAMP stack, but that was an awesome part of the stuff which enabled so many applications, right, of the time. So I think that's interesting, right, what the other field it's generated. Now, another thing which is awesome is this performance work. Again, kind of if Mark Callaghan recognizing that, and I would highlight kind of two things. Like one is performance improvements, and then also what in MariaDB there have not been those kind of performance regressions, right? Where I think in MySQL maybe starting from version, I don't know, like 4.1 or 5 would say, oh, we're getting more optimizer features, yada yada yada. So our single thread performance is lower and lower in every major version, and that kind of sucks. Especially why it sucks, right? Well, because of two reasons, right? One is CPUs are not getting a lot faster; they're getting a lot wider. Right now, we can get the servers with a gazillion of cores. I looked today on AWS. How many cores do you think the server has? If mine is not an option, how many cores can you get? Any guesses?
16.
Okay.
128 at least.
Okay. Huh? Well, so actually you can get a server with almost 2,000 cores. Right? I was like surprised to see that 2,000 cores and about 32 terabytes. What's that? Yeah, that's like some expensive, HP designed server, right? If you look at more commodity stuff, right, that goes to about it's like 192 cores, both on ARM and Intel, right? But still, that is a damn large number of cores, right? Even 200. All right, and the problem in this case we see with kind of a single core performance degradation, right, is also because CPUs are not getting much faster, but also the MySQL is not able to execute things in parallel, right, which can become increasingly problematic. The other thing which I would highlight, which is interesting. I want to especially, flag that because, well, we did have argument with 90 years ago, right, about the DSL and abandon there, right, and say, hey, you know what, it will be useless. And he'll say, well, no, our intent is to actually have some maintained version of a max scale after it turns out to GPL, right, which happened with max scale 2106. And I also went to kind of check, hey, you know, is it actually doing some development, right, after that change date, and you can see there was, you know, release with some bug fixes a couple of months ago. So that's cool. That's good to see what.
And then because MaxScale is released every half year, it will be a new GPL version, new features every half year, guaranteed.
Yes. So anyway, I wanted to highlight that because that is, I think, the first thing that we see there. You know, GPL version of MaxScale release, and which is being released out there. Okay, the next I want to, well, you may already kind of heard me kind of hinted to that. If you look at, from my standpoint, that is kind of my wish, and I think that's also opportunity for MariaDB also likes as kind of in this place, right? The fact what in the MySQL MariaDB space you see there, you know, queries have a single thread execution, a lot of maintenance operations are not very parallel as well, right? And we have a lot of queries, a lot of cores, right? That's becomes more and more kind of limited factor, right? You just, you know, run the iter table, right, and sit for hours while your server is kind of pretty much idle.
Now we are talking about MySQL.
Well, with iter table, yes, but with query execution, you know, batch jobs, that's still the case, right?
Until June.
Okay.
Until June.
Until June. Well, that's good to hear what you guys are.
Because that's my next big project. I will start in June. Very okay.
Okay. Good to hear, Mansi, right? Like, so for a change, you agree with me. That is awesome. Oh, I'm agreeing with you, right? Like, whatever you want to go at. Yeah. Well, cool.
But what is the maintenance function?
Well, the maintenance, what I think in this case, that goes for, you know, everything else, right? Like, I would call it an iter table, right? Making sure you can do that. You can have some other things, whatever you call it, like optimize similar to iter, whatever you have to do with the database, right? And, you would think about the, you know, backups and restores, those kind of activities. So, like, you know, if you look at the holistically of all of that. Okay, so let's see. Well, technically, I just have 5 minutes left, so we can just get that for questions. As I mentioned, the other stuff is kind of repeating the things for what I had done the last year. So I thought that may be more efficient instead if you have some. Yes, the gentleman in the back.
Yeah, I'm very curious on your opinion about in this part of work on this huge multiple core service. How should we try to resolve? How should we achieve the maximum performance based on this huge machine?
Well, look, I think this is a kind of a question. Well, the first thing I would say is this, right? I would say there's like an extremely big iron exists, right? But you know how it goes. After certain things, let's say in the cloud, right? For example, as you get in the kind of commodity scale, maybe that is up to, you know, like a terabyte of memory, you know, 128, maybe 192 cores, right? That is still quite cost effective, right? In terms of that's, you know, essentially kind of the same machine allows, you know, just kind of VMs, right? Then you go into that like a custom engineered hardware with gazillion of cores, right? And, you know, the tens of terabytes of memory. that becomes freakishly expensive, and frankly, a lot of the MariaDB users probably wouldn't do that, right? So I think that's kind of looking at those kind of couple of hundred cores, right? And that's probably again going to double in the next few years, right? And low number of terabytes of memory is the optimization target, right? That's something I would look at, right? And in terms of code optimization, look, I mean, I'm not the best person to look at that. I think the most important thing I highlight, right? You just need to think how you can use them for large amount of queries, right, and other operations. So that would be the thing. Yes.
How important is the 5% performance improvement?
Well, I think this is interesting, right? I mean, it depends, right? But for most people, it's not really going to be their big change, right? If you look about that and say, hey, you know what? Something is 10% faster. Like, am I going to do that? Right? That's kind of a good, I think, an additional factor in decision making, right? But why I'm saying it depends because it also it depends often on the scale, right? Like, for example, if you think about ARM CPUs versus Intel CPUs, and hey, you know what? A lot of cloud vendors which have 1,000 costs, right? Well, for them trading off 10% of the cost for the same performance, is very meaningful, right? Then you can have like a fixed investment, if you will, right, for that scalable gains, right? So that is what I would see. I mean, in my opinion, kind of what is more important, right? What everybody see is looking at is their efficiency of their people, right? Because people are expensive. And then B, kind of like the smart people are very hard to find, so you have a few of them, right? And so having them the most productive, that becomes very important, right? So that's why, for example, say, hey, you're talking about the vector search, hey, think about what can be done. So there, MariaDB enables that kind of 5x, 10x developer productivity, right? Or it reduces that kind of development annoyance, right? Because it's not always a question of how productive we are, right? But sometimes you're doing something and it's like, oh my gosh, why I'm doing that kind of stupid shit, right? Versus, yeah, it still takes time, but it's kind of over, reasonable and maybe even kind of fun, right? That's impacts the choices, right? Okay. Anybody else? 1, 2, 3.
Do you have an opinion about MariaDB vertical scale versus fully of?
Do I have an opinion of MariaDB versus?
Just the distributed
Vertical scale.
MariaDB, just horizontal scale.
Again, I didn't hear you. What?
Do you have an opinion of MariaDB or MySQL or Postgres vertically scaled database versus horizontally scaled distributed database?
Well, I think this is an interesting question, right? Because I just had this, I actually have a talk about exactly this topic, right? The distributed databases are essential at the other talk. And the answer in this case for me is it depends, right? One thing that is kind of always interesting is, okay, you have this kind of a big iron. How much you can get from the single database, and what actually the showstoppers kind of to push in that boundary, right? One thing it was interesting. I recently kind of get this poll. Mostly it was the PostgreSQL community. How large databases on a single node they're comfortable in production, right? And there are a number of people say, hey, we can handle 100 terabytes or more, on the single node, right? Like that is there. It is kind of high number, right? And I think kind of I would say like a Postgres community has been often known saying, hey, we'll do unnatural things to get more out of a single node. Where if you look at majority big MySQL users, like Facebook in a day and wherever they do starting, right? But I think that is all the case, right? Even if you look at 100 terabyte, that is a lot of data, and what that means is you can pretty much power any enterprise application of a single database. Probably replicated, right? You do not need to introduce that, complicated thing, right? Even if you have some sort of like enterprise-based SaaS, it is a very likelihood you single tenant, right, can live in a single tenant node-sharded database, right? Of course, if you go to the other kind of applications, hey, I want to build the Facebook, right, or something like that, then you most likely. There is no even that big server, right, wouldn't be able to handle that application, right? The challenge I see in this case is this, right? I don't think the developers quite understand what kind of application they have and all those kind of applications. So many of them think like, oh, what is my path if this thing is going to be successful and getting 1 million users, right, and whatever, right? And I want kind of the future-proof application by choosing maybe more complicated technology than I need, because it has the features I actually don't, right? So that's, I think, my my take, right? So from it's like with MongoDB, right? In market at a web scale, 99% did not need that, but a lot of people wanted it. Just what if we actually need to go ahead? And I think the last thing I would say about that is looking and say, hey, what is exactly your blockers, right? If you think about, okay, let's think about the, 10 terabyte database, 10 terabytes MariaDB, or 100 terabytes MariaDB database, right? What is exactly prevents us from running that successfully? And in my opinion, in many cases, it would not be your kind of small, simple queries, right? It would be even, like some complicated, like semi-analytical query or something, right, which at least you want to be parallelized, right, and various maintenance operations, right, which need to be kind of parallel, need to be non-blocking, and all that jazz. Okay, well, I think I'm out of time already, so thank you, folks. That's it. Back to Kai.
Thank you, Peter. Very, very good.